everyone. Hope everybody's doing well, blessed, and enjoying family. As always, do please allow me to thank everyone for everyone's words, wishes, prayers, as the time and love and support everyone shares with me. From the heart, thank you. Also, do please help me getting the message out there a little bit more by liking, sharing, subscribing, and hyping the video. Thank you. Well, getting right into what I want to touch on today. Today, you could say it's going to be a little bit different, right? Because I'm going to speak about two camaradas from OC that were never made, right? They were just camaradas, but they were well trusted or high up there to the point a lot of people thought they were pillies, right? And just to let everybody know, again, I'm not on here to spread poison. None of these two individuals ever claimed to be a Billy. They were camaradas and solid, right? Nevertheless, you know, I said it many times, to maintain relevant, you have to follow into them behaviors. But anyways, this gonna circle around more on the homie Cisco, right? I spoken about him for those that have heard my stories since the beginning. We were in a riot together, right? And we got separated once we left that prison. Cisco was from the city of Orange. And anyways, Cisco was the nephew of Franky Chavez. Franky Chavez was the primo of the homie Mad Dog, right? That was up there in Pelican Bay with us from Cypress, city of Orange. Frankie was from F. And anyways, Cisco was in touch with both of them, right? It was more of a family thing than you could say a working environment, right? At least from his end. You see, at least when it came to Frank, when he was on the street, he had so much power that sometimes Sana had him trump a Pili that was present. You know, for example, if he was in the county, certain Pilis will fall in line and he had the county, right? Certain neighborhoods. Anyways, again, this ain't about him, but you know, unfortunately, that camarada will go through the ways of Sana per se. For those that are familiar with Sana, he was real good of pumping you up, building you, making you into a member or a high place camarada, but he would eventually get jealous. That's all it was, jealousy, and he would start going against you because you wanted what you felt entitled to and he felt you weren't entitled to. If you guys get what I'm saying. Nevertheless, Cisco, when we hit Ironwood, he went to a different yard at first. And then a riot happened with the Paisas on B yard. And he would end up on A yard, right? And I'll put it to you like this. There was so much respect for Mad Dog, from Terco at least, that Cisco was able to do his thing and answer his uncle up in the bay, right? Without having to kick down anything, you know. And if he did, it was out of respect and love from him, right? From Mad Dog more so, because he knew Terco, he was in charge of a yard at least. And anyways, at this time, I had not met the camaradas, right? when it came to Mad Dog and Frankie. I've heard a lot about Frank, and my respects again. They were what I honestly wanted to get to, right? Which is never jump ships to becoming anything else but a campolero, right? But one that's there with a lot of respect, right, from the senores. But anyways, that wasn't the case with them. They wanted to be Pilis, but there was roadblocks per se, right? For example, with Mad Dog, he got validated, and it don't matter how much you're relevant back there, you're still sitting down. Anyway, Cisco would end up doing his time. I was there with him for like a year. He was a good boy, in the sense that we're in a riot up north, and again, anywhere we went really up north, and this time we were outnumbered. So, just the fact of a camarada coming out and bucking up spoke a lot about him, right? But down in Ironwood, we were in riot with the woods, and then with the blacks, and we were gonna go to war due to Osito from with the others. Anyways, the point of the story, he would eventually end up paroling. Under certain not related politics circumstances, we stayed in touch. More so it had to do with a female that was related to him. He wanted to hook me up with, right? So we stayed in touch a little bit, and it just became too much. From the moment he got out, it was problems. You know, for example, you got two tios, right? They're cousins, but to you it's primero, segundo tio, right? Type of thing, and they envy each other. It's like, hey, whatever you're doing with me, don't mention it to Frank, and vice versa, right? Instead of working together, they were. It's how it should be, regardless, right? What you do with a pili, you should never speak on in the presence of another pili. It's just common sense. In this case, it was camaradas, but it didn't matter, right? It's when things started basically going over. It's a family thing, right? And a mandatory thing, as it always does. Unfortunately, after a couple Pilis took the dive, right? Or they got pushed out, like Sporty, and then Playboy got sat down for a minute. There was that big hole that Frank took. Just being sincere, he took. But at the same time, you had Pilis that were, you could say their ego was hurt. Because how you going to give a camarada the same type of power they have? And this is Insana, right? Well, as time went by, there was a couple mistakes, right, that Cisco made. And me personally, I don't see him as mistakes. I just see him as part of, you can't do things and expect they're always going to go right. If that was the case, they wouldn't be camaradas busted, right? But anyways, for Frank, he went down to Mexico, and lining up some things, and he was basically taken by another camarada from Anaheim, right? And they were the camaradas family, right? But they never worked with them, and you know, it comes with greed, right? Instead of Frank saying, "Okay, well, let me get one, let me test out the candy in it, see how much sugar it has in the tank, and we'll go from there." Nah, he tapped into something like a desperate individual. Hey, well, send me 20, 25 of them. And then once it arrived, it was wet, and for those that know, wet material sits, right? It eventually reaches out, but it sits. And of course, prices, you'll probably, if you break even, it's probably what it'll be, right? Even though you're paying much lower prices in Mexico, the material just ain't worth it, right? In Califas. And of course, Frank being true to that mentality, he ain't gonna chalk up the mistake, right? Cisco guided him there. He went and spoke there. The homie didn't use them. He was just trying to basically please, right? Bring something to the table to his steels, and you know, if Frank would have been intelligent, he sends a camarada there on the spot. Hey, a ver, let me check it out. That knows what he's looking at, how to test it. But anyways, again, he went with that desperation, I guess, to tap into something and then turn it around on Cisco. Again, you you were able to pull the jale out, right? So it wasn't like acá y allá. He got discipline, you know. And the second one came with Mad Dog, and it was, for a while. Well, you guys know how we get jale up when we were sailing in Pelican Bay, right? It's through the legal mail, and you gotta have real good skills ironing and pasting and ironing, right? But there's some hudas that, even though it's against the law to open it, they open it, at least in front of you, right? And from many times Cisco took care of his deal up there, there was that one time, right, that Huda found it, and basically Mad Dog was about to get kicked out. At that time, a lot of time had passed by. I was already up there when it happened. And Mad Dog had already promised Billy's a Wagarar because it was like a little drop coming in, right? And it just got busted. Again, they never think about the losses of the doings, right? There's always losses. You can't have 100% all the time happening the way you want it. It's not how life works. It's like nothing works like that. And anyways, they put him back on active mode. Instead of getting kicked out, he sat back down till everybody got kicked out in 2015, right? But backtracking, you know, it messed up a lot of things that Billy's wanted to do with Mad Dog when he got out the linea. You know, I don't really want to make this about Billy's, but let me just say Mad Dog had a lot of problems, right? When he got out, due to this exactly. He got accused of setting on the holiday. Actually, even though he presented paperwork, there were still individuals that couldn't get their hands to look at the paperwork. And they don't believe each other, even if they're carnales. we're talking about dope. It's like, nah, this fool sat on it. They didn't want to give us none, them type of things. Remember, they don't like each other. It's just facts. And for that, and Matt Duck not being able to get out and do his thing, and basically he got accused. He was claiming to be a Pili. Again, he never did, right? At least me personally, I never heard the vato or the camarada do it, right? But anyways, since all this happened, Pili's back in Pelican Bay is, who sent you this? Oh, my sobrino. We did it wrong. He messed up a lot of things that we had planning, which is lies. That thing getting caught, messed up, them getting high. Their vein feeding for dope. That's all it messed up. And that's a big enough penalty to have Awato put on the lista. And instead of Mad Dog speaking for his nephew and Frank, they decided to strike her out type of thing, right? They didn't even give him the third one, being a family member. And in reality, Cisco didn't have to do anything for them. They were his uncles, but they were camaradas, you know. But they didn't touch their heart for their nephew. They put him on that lista, and he was done. At least it's a good standing camarada. He ever came back to prison, it was he had to lock it up or get out and buck up, boogie and get stabbed and come back out and until one way or another. And it's a messed up position that you're being put off to show love to your family members. But again, the homie, again, this isn't the same as other of my stories, right? The homie would end up just pushing away, not having no repercussion of it. But the repercussion is he had to move states, lose contact with family, friends, because again, they're his deals. The homie, they're still there in good standings, right? Just he had to take the consequences because these camaradas, as myself, didn't have the backbone to speak for him. A simple, hey, he has sent up here 5, 6, 7 times. They all gone through. It's just one of them things, right? It happens. No, you know, they rather try to clean it up by taking their nephew's career. And he was a good boy, and unfortunately moved away. And I found out because all my homegirl shy, right? He tried to send me the details through my homegirl shy, and she didn't send it. She told me in her own words because again, we're slammed and IGI is on every little piece of mail, right? But it's what you get for stepping up to the plate. You see, this is just a little look of what I always say. Once you're up there in that certain pedestal, that mentality just kicks in. As a camarada, not even gonna say being there in that spot of being trusted. I always say you have to stay relevant. Mistakes aren't tolerated, and unfortunately, that comes with you having to be dirty, to think the same. You know, if a Pili puts a mistake on you, it's real hard for you from ricochet from it. And a smart camarada that's doing his thing knows that. But again, this ain't an ending like others, but it is an in to say, Mad Dog was straight Tecato. I can't speak about Frankie because I personally never done time with them, just through mail, right? But he said it himself. I had to give my nephew up because Pilis were mad because they couldn't get high. Point blank. Those are the facts. You see, everyone sees what the program is now, but it's always been you get in the way from them individuals putting a little bit of vitamin in their pain, you're done. This was, you could say, a happy ending, right? The homie didn't get touched. He never, at least to my knowledge, came back to prison. He went out, did his family thing, but for trying to be a righteous camarada, he had to give everything away, which unfortunately is what must be done at times, right? Pull out of your comfort zone to do something. But again, don't get lied, even by family that are there, that hey, you'll get the recognition for this. No, you'll get the recognition when things go bad. Know that, and know that a camarada, if you ain't a made member, you're irrelevant. Things have to ricochet in a negative aspect towards someone. And believe me, everybody's gonna be dodging and skating to not be him. Be wise, stay true to yourself, and loyal to loved ones.